Since it's recording, we're good to go.
Okay. I think we are ready to go here. I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. My name's Phil Condon, professor in environmental studies for a few more weeks. And I'm so happy to be here today, kind of running this meeting and chairing the portfolio committee for Claire Carlson. And I trust you're all in the right place because, and you're here to hear Claire. So I'm just going to say a few words about how we'll do it today. Can everybody hear me? I want to make sure it's coming through. Oh, there's Anna Maria. Hi. Between Dan and me, I think we'll get the tech thing going. We had to do a few adjustments. But anyway, I'm going to introduce Claire very briefly and turn it over to her. Then she's going to give you an overview of her portfolio and then surprise us all. I'm not quite sure which part she's going to present today, but we'll hear part of it and get the sense of it. And then that'll be between 30 to 40 minutes or so. And then we'll turn it over to questions, and we'd like to reserve at least the first two to her thesis, her portfolio committee, which is myself and Dan Spencer. We'll start out with at least one question, but then we want to open it up to questions from anybody who's here. So got a little, we'll do that, and that'll be another 30 or 45 minutes. And then that will conclude the public part of it, and Dan and I and Claire will talk about the portfolio. And this is unusual. We were just saying this is the first defense presentation graduate in environmental studies that I've been to in 2 years, and Dan's been to in a year and a half in the room. We're in the room here with Claire in Rankin Hall doing this hybrid Zoom presentation. So
and we've all had our vaccines.
Yes, and we've all had our vaccines, and we're all staying socially distant. I can barely see them way over there. So I'm trying to think of anything else just to give you a sense, I think, on the timing. So again, most of you know Claire, and you're going to hear, it's interesting, a lot of what I thought to say about her just by way of quick introduction, you will hear some about in her portfolio today, because she's incorporating areas certainly of her experience in education here in environmental studies over the last 2 years. But it ties right into what Claire did before she came here, which is she earned a BA in International Affairs with a minor in Environmental Studies in Spanish at the University of Nevada at Reno. She also spent a semester abroad in Costa Rica, which ties into at least a portion of her portfolio here. I don't know whether you'll hear that today, but that's important. And another thing that ties right into part of her portfolio and her work in important work in environmental studies is that she worked on 2 different publications at UN Reno, an arts journal and a research journal. And that ties directly into some of the projects that she's done while she's been here with us these last 2 years. She's taken writing courses, writing workshop courses with myself and with 2 of our visiting writers, Anna Maria Spagna, who's here, and Bryce Andrews. Currently, that class is just ending or just ended, I don't know, this week. So she's really immersed in writing courses, but she's also taken, besides a complement of required environmental studies courses, she's taken courses in communications department and in journalism. She's interned with the Sierra Club, which I don't have to say much about because that's integral to her portfolio today. And she was co-editor of Camus magazine, our environmental studies literary environmental journal, both last spring, 2020, and last fall, 2020. So I think that's plenty for me to say. I'll just say, Claire came to us, with only a summer break between undergrad and graduate. She came straight out of her undergraduate work. So she, but I know she impressed me, and I've heard from other faculty, despite that, with her sense of maturity and professionalism as she's approached things here. And that hasn't gotten in the way of her sense of humor either. So we've appreciated all those things about you, Claire, and we're anxious to hear from you right now in your portfolio. So I'll turn it over to Claire Carlson.
Okay.
And you can, whoops.
I got it. How about now? Okay. You would think after a year of doing this that it would be second nature, but no. Yes, so thank you so much for that introduction, Phil. I've been really excited to present all of this, my portfolio to you all today. I'm going to try and do this in a way that is somewhat normal because I have 2 in-person audience members and then all of you on Zoom. So I'll probably be addressing some weird in between. Okay, Dan says I can address the Zoom people, so you all are going to see my face directly. So I think, let's see, I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see a shared screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Pick the little line there, so actually a little box so they can see you. Perfect.
Okay. Well, they should be able to see me, I think. If
One thing, sorry about that. It's so frustrating, but we're gonna get. All right, so we gotta click that.
oh, there
that. And now they should see you and you're
perfect. Dan is an expert at all of this because he's been having to deal with doing hybrid Zoom in-person class for a semester. This one? Okay. All right. Hopefully everything will work now.
I can still see your like notes and your other tabs from my perspective. Oh, okay. Just want to make sure that's what you're going for.
Don't worry, you're all getting the behind the scenes. This is a very
okay.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. So now can you all see those notes or?
No, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay, yes, I'm going to get started. Sorry, that's been sort of a long, dealing with technical difficulties, but thank you all for being patient. And thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you all coming, especially if you are in Missoula right now. It's a beautiful day out and it's been really overcast the past couple of days. So thank you for showing up. I know yet another thing on Zoom is taxing, but I appreciate it anyway. So like Phil mentioned, I've been working on a portfolio for my final project for the Environmental Studies Master's Program. Its title is On Finding Motivation, Advocacy, Attention, and Art in the Distraction Era. So are you all able to see a new screen that says overview? Okay, thank you, Shawnee.
Welcome.
Audio, I love it. So an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. My first component of my portfolio was reflections and discussions about my Sierra Club internship. So I'll talk about that a bit. Part 2 is my Camus co-editorship. I spent, like Phil mentioned, 2 semesters as Camus co-editor. And so I'll also be discussing and reflecting on that. And then part 3 of my portfolio was 2 essays kind of talking about this idea of individuality and distraction and how that can impede upon activism, but also how we can sort of garner our attention and motivation and how we can build grassroots movements essentially, or how we can get motivated building those. I had to include the Spock picture just because you're all welcome if you need to go early, but I thought it was a really fitting picture for this. I don't have 320 slides though, I promise. Okay, so with the Sierra Club, I was interning with their 30 by 30 campaign, whose goal is to protect 30% 30% of lands and water by 2030. And it's a nationwide campaign that has a coalition of organizations. So it's not just the Sierra Club. There are lots of environmental organizations, environmentalists, and scientists who are have all kind of committed to this 30 by 30 goal. And it's also kind of within this larger campaign called Nature Needs Half, which is built on biologist E.O. Wilson's theory that in order to protect the most biodiversity possible, we need to eventually be protecting 50% of the planet. So this is kind of a step in that larger goal. And I was brought onto the campaign in spring of 2020. And I worked closely with Summer Nelson, who is the executive director of the Montana chapter of the Sierra Club, and Len Broberg, who is a board member and also environmental studies faculty member. And so within that first, the first part of my internship, it was in spring of 2020, I organized and facilitated public meetings to gain both awareness about the campaign and also get an idea of what places people wanted to protect and how we could go about doing that. And then in the spring of 2021, so in the past few months, I've been working on kind of organizing those first 30 by 30 action projects, kind of getting the ball rolling on actually doing some protection work within Montana. So this next slide, this is from the public meeting that I hosted in Missoula. So we actually did last spring, we were able to host one in-person public meeting on March 10th, which I believe was one day before COVID-19 was declared a pandemic. So it was very close to when everything shut down, but I'm really glad we were able to do it in person because we were able to have a really dynamic group of people and able to, have discussions with people in person, which was really nice. So this slide kind of demonstrates the importance of protecting biodiversity. We're currently amidst a climate crisis and an extinction crisis. Both of those things have been born from human activities like burning fossil fuels, deforestation, urban development. All of these activities have created an approximate 1 degree Celsius increase in global temperature since the pre-industrial era. And right now it's likely to increase to above 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. And that 1.5 degrees is super important to note because that is the temperature that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has declared we need to stay under unless or else we're going to experience some really devastating impacts from climate change. So the total estimated number of plant, animal, and insect species on Earth is 8 million, and up to 1 million of those are, as we know, are currently threatened with extinction. And this kind of mass extinction has been coined the 6th mass extinction because there have been ones that have gone before it. But this is the first extinction that is being directly caused by humans, at least to some degree. So an essential way of fighting this loss of biodiversity is through protecting and restoring natural spaces, which is where the 30 by 30 campaign comes in. And that campaign, it's important, of course, on a global level to be protecting these places, but that can't really start unless we're looking at the local areas. So with my responsibilities, we were looking at Missoula and Bozeman and much of Montana to figure out what places might benefit from being protected. And at the meetings, we split into different discussion groups of areas that people, had ideas about protecting, were passionate about protecting. So these included big, wild, kind of classic wilderness areas, open spaces, and urban areas. And people were interested in protecting all of those places. And this next slide, this shows some of the notes that we were able to take in the in-person Missoula meeting that we had. Some of these included, advocating for protections for the Great Burn recommended wilderness area, creating more pocket parks around Missoula, and implementing restoration projects like the planting of native plants in open spaces. So in spring of 2021, so this all happened last spring, and then things kind of came to a major pause because of the pandemic. But this spring, we've been able to actually start organizing some of these projects. So we actually hosted our first one last week to pair with Earth Day. So this is the graphic from that. It was called the 30 by 30 Nature Care Earth Week. And so my role this year has been to coordinate with volunteers, plan this event, and host volunteer meetings. So with this event, we did a cleanup of Slevins Island in Fort Missoula. And I think there was about 15 or 20 people who participated. We had to do it remotely, so people just showed up on their own, but it was still a really great project just to kind of get things started with 30 by 30. And we're hoping that that will be kind of the first of many projects that we host related to protecting lands and waters. And the future goals for the 30 by 30 campaign are to create an action project toolkit, so people can actually take the toolkit and then create their own projects, because the Sierra Club doesn't have the capacity to be running all of these projects. We're hoping that volunteers are able to use the tools that we give them and implement projects in their own community. So yeah, that was kind of a lot of what we did for the Sierra Club. I have more written in my portfolio, which both Dan and Phil have, and that will be printed, I think, in a couple of weeks for people to have access to. So yeah, that was my experience with the Sierra Club, and it's been really rewarding. And I think it's been a great look into what working with the campaign is, and then also how to encourage people to get motivated to do some of this work that's really needed for these grassroots movements. So my next component of my portfolio was my co-editorship with Camus Magazine, which is the Environmental Studies Department's environmental writing magazine. I was co-editor for 2 semesters, spring and fall of 2020, which meant I was a part of the assembly of 2 journals that you can see here, the summer 2021 and the winter 2021. My responsibilities as co-editor included managing our editorial boards. The editorial boards consist of volunteers who help us go through the submissions that Camus gets. Camus gets hundreds of submissions every submission period for each of these journals. This semester, I was on the poetry board, and we got at least 300 submissions, and within each of those submissions, there was usually about 5 poems. So we were going through 1,500 poems and deciding out of those ones which to publish, and we only publish just a few. So it's a huge undergoing, and without volunteers, Camus really can't do that, because the co-editors, there's only 2 of us. So we definitely need a really good volunteer base of people for that. Other responsibilities I had were hosting events like the Wild Mercy Reading Series, end of the semester release parties, and Prairie Songs, which is a big fundraising event. Again, unfortunately, because of COVID, we weren't able to do a lot of those in-person things, but we were able to do Wild Mercy both last year and this year. This year it was on Zoom, but I think that was maybe an interesting thing that maybe Camus can do in the future. of doing some sort of hybrid Zoom in-person event, because I think that was a really great way of getting people from just across the country to tune into Wild Mercy. And finally, and kind of the biggest responsibility as co-editor, is designing the journal and copy editing and coordinating with our printer and eventually mailing it out. So myself and my co-editors, for spring, my co-editor was Jackie Buschjager, and for fall, Winona Rachel was my co-editor. And between the two of us, we just kind of, hunker down in the office for a while and try to create something that is a journal. And I think it's been pretty successful both times that I was involved with it. So I'm going to talk a little more deeply about both of these journals. So the first journal that I was a part of our theme was the fierce urgency of now, which we chose to pair with the Environmental Studies Department's 50th anniversary theme. And this phrase is from a Martin Luther King Jr. speech, and it became even more relevant with the pandemic. Things became much, just the urgency of things was really highlighted. And that kind of drastically shifted our interpretation of the theme. And also, so Ana Maria Spagna is here today. Thank you for coming. So our feature author was Ana Maria, and her piece, Out of the Box, she was kind enough to kind of do some major edits to it once we realized that we needed to address the elephant in the room. We couldn't publish a journal amidst COVID that didn't at least acknowledge that something really life-changing had happened to all of us. So her piece, which is called Out of the Box, talks about her experience releasing fishers into the North Cascades and the lessons that these shy and persistent creatures can teach us. Those boxes, at least this is how I interpreted this. Of course, everyone interprets art and writing differently, but I kind of interpreted it as the boxes that they were kept in pre-release is sort of all of our own metaphorical boxes that we need to break free of in order to make changes that we need to make in order to create a more equitable society. So this is a quote from that essay. It says, "My box is everything I used to believe, how I moved in the world, all that gave me identity and safety. I know I need to let go. I am trying. It is excruciating. How is it possible that, in the urgency of now, much of what's asked of us is radical acceptance?" So these words provide us a reminder that it's not easy to make the changes we need to make, but it's also really necessary for a world that is ever evolving. And it's writing like this that kind of speaks to how essential art and prose is in influencing people to break out of mindsets that keep us trapped in like colonialist and patriarchal structures that are kind of creating the crises we're experiencing today. And without writing, that reminds us of what's important. We're kind of left without a gauge for how we should respond to these issues. So, writing has the potential to influence policy and change minds. I mean, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring really speaks to that. And I think that also shows why it's really important to fund the arts. It's something that needs to be prioritized because it's essential and it has so much power. So yeah, I think Ana Maria's writing really speaks to that. And then the second, well, I guess I'll go back. So the second journal that I co-published was the winter 2020 edition. Winona and we chose the theme resilience, kind of to think about everything, after we published this at the tail end of a really long year where we were both reckoning with inequities related to the COVID-19 pandemic, systemic racial oppression, a presidential election year, and just this ever-present climate crisis. So because of all of these issues, we really wanted to examine how people were responding to, to the things that we're dealing with. So our featured author, Laura Pritchett, she gave us a piece called Calling Mother Earth on the Crisis Hotline. And this is a quote from that. "All I know is this: when the time is right, I'll go back to that bridge and stare down at the huge cavern. I'll pick up the phone. I'll say, hello? And I'll hear your raspy voice saying, crisis hotline, Mama Gaia speaking. And I'll say, what's that you said? Endure? And what else? And you'll say, if you listen, I have a couple of ideas on wise and humble rebuilding. There is hope." So this piece was the character in this story is writing postcards to Mother Earth and kind of grappling with climate grief and democracy grief. And I think, and this is kind of at the tail end of that essay, and it shows how, how things can feel really dire, but if you look around at your environment, at the world around you, there's a lot that you can actually learn. And I think there's a lot of lessons that we can take on that wise and humble rebuilding. So this was just yet another example of, I think, art and writing as a way to also kind of like understand the things that we're going through and to, it's a way of processing and it's a way of healing. And and it really felt like the Resilience Journal did a lot of that. So I'm really grateful to have been part of Camas because it publishes some really amazing stuff. I recommend, if all of you, anything that you take from today is to go to the Camas magazine website and check it out, because there's some subscribe. There's some really cool stuff on there and some really amazing authors that we publish. And I think the upcoming journal will be published in a couple of months, and the theme is Ramble, and the featured author is Bryce Andrews, if that gets anyone excited. So those were the first two components of my portfolio. And the last one is, I'm going to be reading one of the essays that I wrote for that third component. Are we doing okay on time? Okay, great.
Yeah, about 30 minutes or a little less.
Okay, perfect. Great, so I'll kind of end this with a reading. So this is sorry, I've got a lot of slides with quotes right now. But this is the epigraph to an essay called Willful and Sometimes Free. There is a power that can be created out of pent-up indignation, courage, and the inspiration of a common cause, and that if enough people put their minds and bodies into that cause, they can win. To walk through the streets of Los Angeles during the mid-20th century was to mimic the experience of being trapped inside the exhaust pipe of a car that had failed its smog test. The air was sooty and dark and left an acrid smell lingering in the nostrils of all who dared to spend time in it. And eventually, you would develop a certain hacking in your lungs that would be hard to kick. Los Angeles County is located in the center of a geographic bowl, bordered by the Santa Monica Mountains to the north and east, and the Santa Ana Mountains and San Joaquin Hills to the southeast. In combination with the area's dense population, this topographical basin is the perfect place for smog to linger, creating a perpetual haze in the city. Throughout the mid-1900s, the smog was so bad that sporting events were held indoors, patients were frequently checked into hospitals with reports of headaches and chest pain, and agricultural fields often had dismal yields at the end of the season due to the poor air quality. The effects of this pollution was felt by everyone, albeit at different scales and severity, depending on the ability for people to avoid the outdoors. However, the population shared the general consensus that there was a serious problem impacting Los Angeles County. The uptick in air pollution in Los Angeles can first be tracked to the industrial fumes and smoke belching out of the factories that began to crowd Southern California at the turn of the 20th century. World War II increased the area's status as an industrial base for production, and between the years 1939 and 1943, visibility in the city worsened significantly. Backyard trash incinerators were another culprit of pollution, spewing black soot into the air and contributing to the poor visibility. In addition to this, the county's population was increasing, creating more sprawl throughout the basin. This sprawl, paired with the rising number of households owning cars in the 1950s, jump-started Los Angeles's reputation as a mecca for traffic jams. The first smog control efforts went into effect in the late 1940s and 1950s, reducing smoke from factories and sulfur dioxide emissions from oil refineries, and regulating trash incineration. In 1959, the California Motor Vehicle Pollution Control Board was created by the state's legislature to tackle the issue of car emissions. And in the following 2 decades, smog checks became mandatory and the transition to the catalytic converter began. In 1970, the Clean Air Act was passed, which set reductions requirements for nitrogen oxide and carbon monoxide emissions in cars, the 2 pollutants largely responsible for the smog issue in Los Angeles. Soon enough, with these efforts, air quality and visibility gradually began to improve. And while not totally solved, to this day, there are still many hazardous air quality alerts administered in the city during the year. It's now possible to hike to the Hollywood sign or play in the park without incurring long-lasting side effects. While legislation played an extremely important role in prompting responses to this air quality crisis, what makes this case stand out is how engaged the general public was in the issue and how citizen pressure invoked these legislative responses. In the 1950s, demonstrators went to the streets in protest of the pollution. Many of these people were part of Stamp Out Smog, an initiative formed by a group of Beverly Hills housewives with the goal to increase the public's attention toward the issue. Pictures from these protests show participants wearing face masks and carrying signs reading, "The monsters come of age, 21 years of smog is enough." This 21 was in reference to the worsened smog since the increase in industrial production in Southern California during World War II. In addition to protests, Stamp Out Smog lobbied city and state officials to create smog regulations, which resulted in automotive emissions standards that at the time were the toughest in the country. Without the public demanding action, it's unlikely the regulations and standards set to combat air pollution in Los Angeles County would have been nearly as stringent or effective. In an interview with Time magazine, climate scientist Susan Solomon accredited the public engagement surrounding this issue to the fact that the pollution was visible and could be felt. People would blow their noses and come away with black snot. Clothes hung out to dry would be soiled by ash and soot produced by trash burning in backyards, and eyes and lungs would begin to sting if an individual spent any significant amount of time outdoors. People's everyday lives were being affected by this, which made the issue a personal one. In contrast to environmental issues like deforestation or glacier melt that are neither felt nor seen by large portions of the population, there were tangible daily reminders of the poor air quality ever present in Los Angeles, prompting outcry from the public. The urgency people felt about smog led to direct action from the government, and things improved. So what does this example tell us? That humans need to be pushed and prodded and inconvenienced before change can happen? Is it proof that individuals coming together on a particular issue has the potential to influence policy, which thereby impacts the outcome of a crisis? I believe that the Los Angeles smog issue is evidence that public engagement is a vital part of creating change if people feel enough urgency to do so. Therefore, the real question becomes, how do we encourage humans to come together to insist for change on a certain cause when there are no tangible inconveniences or circumstances dictating that we do so? I am the annoying roommate. I dig through the trash to rinse Bud Light cans before tossing them in the recycling. I bury food waste in the backyard, and I keep the thermostat at such a low temperature that people tend to wear hats in the house. Much of this has to do with the frugality my parents ingrained in me from a young age, as well as a side effect of taking one too many environmental studies classes. Learning about the depth of our collective screwedness has given me a low-lying anxiety that I carry around every day, which makes me super fun at parties. I've often wondered whether there's any point in worrying myself over these tiny efforts that, in the face of climate change and corporate lobbying, seem to be futile attempts at self-preservation. My peers have shared the same concern that nothing that we do, whether it be saving glass to bring to the next collection event or biking the mile to campus, is making any difference at a larger scale. When there are companies like Amazon and Exxon that are making millions every day from exploiting labor and the planet, it can feel utterly hopeless to think that rinsing out a can of beans for recycling is doing any good. Still, I do it anyway. In research conducted by scientists Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler on the influence of others in our own actions and decision-making processes, they found that people are profoundly impacted by their social circles. If a friend of a friend takes up smoking, your chances of eventually picking up smoking increase. They realized that people's social networks give rise to phenomena that are not present in individuals or reducible to their solitary desires and actions. Indeed, culture itself is one such phenomenon. In other words, the influence of another's decisions on your own can be enough to invoke a complete habit shift. And with enough people, this shift can become a movement. I am a vegetarian, which means that a lot of people ask me if I eat fish. Let the record show that I do not. That is pescatarianism. I don't think that I'm annoying or come across as judgmental about my vegetarianism, but I'm sure my loved ones would argue otherwise. Regardless, I've discovered that my ranting has made a difference with at least a handful of my friends who've either decreased the amount of meat they eat or stopped altogether. While not eating meat as an individual has little long-term impact, not eating meat as a collection of people can make a huge difference in decreasing carbon emissions. This change doesn't even have to happen from giving up all meat. Picking one type of meat, like beef, can have a huge impact. One serving of beef accounts for 6.61 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is methane, and it's all the things that are equivalent to about 6.61 pounds of carbon dioxide. In the United States in 2018, an approximate 54.6 pounds of beef were available for consumption for each person in 1 year. This totals to roughly 360.9 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent per year, simply from eating one type of meat. If just 5 people removed beef from their diet for a year, close to a ton of carbon emissions could be avoided. For scale, in order to meet the 2-degree goal of the Paris Climate Accord, a person has to emit less than an annual 2.1 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Getting just a handful of people to stop eating beef can save literal tons of carbon emissions, helping to balance the scales as people vary in their ability to keep their own carbon footprints below this 2.1 metric tons. The impact of other people's choices on one's own actions should not be understated. The argument that an individual can't make a difference forgets that it is the influence of a collection of individuals that can change entire cultures. Trump became Trump when people from across the United States banded together in support of the former president. Without these small collectives of similarly minded people convinced of the promise of a former reality television star, Make America Great Again rhetoric and beliefs wouldn't have been nearly as pervasive. The actions of one person have an effect on another person, which affects another and another and another and another, and people have influence, no matter how small. By combining small habit changes with larger efforts like being part of mutual aid networks and joining protests, the collective actions of individuals can add up to make a difference. What's most important is that these efforts be repeated again and again throughout your whole life. Taking care of each other and the planet requires consistent, regular action in whatever form that looks like to you. Importantly, activism should come from a place of genuine understanding, support, and empathy for whatever the cause may be. It cannot be a one-time effort to make yourself feel or look good, which is so often what happens, especially during times where activist movements become mainstream. During the summer 2020 protests in response to the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Instagram went absolutely ballistic with pastel-colored infographics made by college freshmen savvy with Photoshop about institutionalized racism and good places to donate money to support Black lives. These palatable posts were shared far and wide by people wanting to educate the public, although this educating was duly critiqued by messages written on signs at protests, reminding white people that it's a privilege to educate yourself about racism instead of experiencing it. In addition to these semi-informative posts, people also shared Black squares on Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020, to join in the hashtag Blackout Tuesday event that was taking place. The idea, which was created by two music marketers, Jamila Thomas and Brianna Aguimong, was originally coined hashtag The Show Must Be Paused. Its goal was to pause business as usual within the music industry in the wake of George Floyd's murder. In a statement released by Thomas and Aguimong, they explained that the music industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry that has profited predominantly from Black art. Our mission is to hold the industry at large, including major corporations and their partners who benefit from the efforts, struggles, and successes of Black people accountable. However, the movement was quickly co-opted by white people eager to share their status as allies without understanding the origin of the blackout squares or doing any of the behind-the-scenes anti-racist work needed to create substantive change. These examples of performative allyship illustrate slacktivism, a type of lazy activism that is concerned about one's own self-image, guilt, and shame, and does very little to tackle the root causes of the issues being faced. Fighting against these problems requires constant, habitual efforts to oppose the structural oppression that is ever present in a culture built on white supremacist values. And the motivation for this work needs not to come from a place of performative allyship, but instead from a place where privilege is recognized and actions are prioritized with the goal of liberation for everyone. So, to return to my original question, how do you encourage individuals to make choices that benefit a certain cause when there's no external motivators dictating that they do so? Peer pressure. If you want change to happen, you must fight for that change and make your fight public and loud. Pressure your social network to join you. Change your habits and see what it does to the people around you. What's needed in the fight for climate and social justice is numbers. People need to join in the efforts, do the dirty work, be part of the grassroots movements and mutual aid networks. People need to be taking care of one another. Our only hope is collections of individuals fighting for change. It's possible that at the end of the day, we won't win the fight, but we certainly won't win if we never fight at all. A movement starts with an individual deciding to do something. One person won't change anything, but a group of people will. Collective action for a common cause is only made possible by many individuals deciding to commit themselves to an idea. Only then can it turn into a grassroots movement. It's true, we are all pieces of a larger, powerful system that is usually working against us. But as willful and sometimes freed human beings, we still have choices. We have the ability to take agency over what we choose to fight for, what causes we want to devote ourselves to. These efforts will require honest and impassioned work, and most imperatively, a reckoning with ourselves. Apathy is the enemy of progress. If we care even a little about the future of our planet, then we must do all that we can to push against the forces that rock us into indifference. Grassroots activism is our best bet to make the future we want to see, and this action starts with the individual. Thank you. And then this is just a slide of like, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are just local resources. This is a really great book all about mutual aid. This is the Montana BIPOC Mutual Aid Fund. These are just some good initiatives to be a part of. But with that, that's the end of my presentation. And I guess this is the question part of the day.
I know.
So I think we're gonna have to go a little bit of back and forth. Bill, do you want to start facilitating this?
Why don't you go first with the question, and I don't know if you can repeat it.
Well, what I'm thinking you do is you might just have to very quickly
Turn off
your, go down to that lower, you can end that. Actually, leave it up for just a moment. It cancels, leave it up this moment. If you go down to the lower left and wherever you are.
Is there a way to end? Oh wait, stop sharing.
Okay.
Now there's everybody.
Go to the mute button there for just a second and click it and go.
Oh, it says you're...
All right, Rob Green, can you hear me? Thumbs
Yes,
up.
sir. I got you.
Okay, so our technical issue is that Phil and I are both on laptops in the same room as Claire's main computer, so we have to turn our audio off so we don't get the feedback on there. So we're going to do a little switching back and forth. But Claire, first of all, wonderful job, and I also felt like for those of you who were at Wild Mercy, you got to hear Claire read her other essay, which I thought evoked the beauty of the Great Basin so powerfully. I love that part of Nevada, and you really brought that to life. Of course, I began my Latin America career in Costa Rica, so that always speaks to me as well. So I'm sorry you didn't have time to read from that essay, but I'm glad we got it on Wild Mercy. But I wondered if you could use the share screen feature for just a moment and go back to the slide that has the two covers of Camas on it. If you can just scroll back to that quickly there. There, right there. Okay, so this is just, I would love to hear more about the design process you talked about that the co-editors go into here. These are two of the most interesting Camas covers I've seen in my many years here. And what's so striking for me is that the byline says the nature of the West, Camas. If somebody had just spoken those words to me, these are not images that I would have come up with. So but I think they're very evocative. They're spectacularly beautiful. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the process that you all went through. Was it primarily the two co-editors? Did the whole editorial group? How did you come up with these images, and why did you choose these two images for these two themes? And I'll mute myself and you can join in here.
Okay, hopefully that's working. Can everyone hear me still? Okay, great. Oh yeah, we've got some lawnmowers blowing outside. We'll close the window. Much better. Yeah, the global warming machines. Yeah, so with these two covers of Camus, so both of these covers, I collaborated with my co-editor with the Fierce Urgency of Now on the left. Jackie and I, we decided to choose one that, I mean, if you look kind of at the catalog of previous Camus journals, a lot of them, they're beautiful, but there's a lot of just like nature, and like I think the last one was a really beautiful cover of a larch tree, which was gorgeous. It was also very dark though, and we wanted to bring some more color into Camus. This was also the first journal we did that the interior was also printed in color, which I think helped a lot in, you know, it gave us a lot more options for what we could publish, because some things, I mean, with this cover piece, you wouldn't want to have that be black and white. It is so evocative, and I think it's because it has those amber eyes and, you know, a bright magenta cover. And I think with that one, it's the staring directly at you that it creates this sense of urgency. It's almost, it felt like that really paired well with the theme. And yeah, I think we just wanted a cover that was different from what we'd seen before. And similarly with the one on the right, this piece is a really beautiful one. The physical journal, it goes to the back page as well. Yeah, so it's a big horizontal piece. So there are more people on the back, but with this one, since there are people, people were a big focus of our resiliency journal, because we were examining kind of, you know, ecosystem resilience, but then also how has resilience been seen in humans. And yeah, I think it just, we're really trying to bring in the people part of Camus. And yeah, the nature of the West. The nature of the West is there's a lot of people out West, and we should be talking about them as well. And people in the environment are always going to be overlapping. So yeah, that was kind of our thoughts with those people featured.
So just gonna come take advantage of your microphone rather than just juggle.
Oh, good idea.
No, I just want to say thank you, Claire, because I think part of what these covers do for me is really force me out of my comfort zone about what I think of the nature of the West, and to really have to think differently, and particularly coming on the heels of the year that you evoked, you know, that we've had the COVID year, the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor year, all these different things, that we have a much more rich, complex understanding, I think, of what the nature of the West means now. And these covers evoke that, but they're startlingly different than their predecessors. And so I was really curious to just hear about the process that you all went to come to that. So thank you.
Oh yeah, I'll stop my audio.
And I don't know whether we've got, I don't have the gallery view here, just a minute. So can people hear me?
We got you, Phil.
Yeah, okay. Well, I want to follow up then. One quick comment. I will agree with what Dan said as the longtime Camus advisor. And all I do is advise and try to keep some continuity over the summers and so forth. It's always important to reiterate that the magazine, since 1992, and certainly since I've been around, 2002, is entirely produced by the students. They make the editorial decisions. So occasionally I get asked for an opinion on that. I do some copy editing, things like that, but mostly it's all their decisions. So I had somewhat of the same reaction as Dan, but I will also say I noticed, and to me it was after, certainly after the first cover here, the first Fierce Urgency of Now. If anybody notices, one magazine I read regularly is High Country News, and they have changed considerably in the last 6-8 months, both their content, but certainly their photography and their covers, in a kind of a way that, as Claire was describing her process, her and Jackie's process for that first cover, remind me of this, that maybe trying to remind all of us that how much a part people are of all of this. I have another question about Camus, but maybe I'll return to that, because I do want to ask one question about something you didn't mention in the presentation that about your Sierra Club work that was so fascinating to me that I think people might like to hear just a quick synopsis of. But at your live meeting, the week before the pandemic descended on us here in Missoula anyway, at your live meeting, you had a participant from the public who was seemed to be upset because you were including small areas like urban areas for people to talk about protecting. And you and she had a conversation about that, if not a disagreement, or at least she was disagreeing. Why are people, why is Sierra Club or anyone focusing on these small things that don't have the quantitative impact of working on big areas? And your explanation in the pages of what you said to her, but also what you didn't say but thought, really gets to the whole, to me, one of the main themes of your portfolio, which is about the human dimension of all this. That all of this, it's a scientific problem, but it is such a human problem. So could you just give us a quick summary of that conversation and the issue that you saw there?
Should I?
Oh, I gotta mute.
Okay. Yeah, so Phil mentioned an interaction I had at the Missoula public meeting with a woman who came up to me after, because I was also a facilitator for our urban areas discussion group. So I was kind of the one leading conversation about, okay, what areas in Missoula can we focus on protecting? And after the meeting, she came to me and said that she was really disappointed that we were focusing on urban areas because it doesn't matter. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we need these big swaths of spaces to be protected because, you know, habitat does need large areas, and focusing on maybe a pocket park, you know, a park at the corner of 6th and Higgins or something, that's going to be, it's not going to be a huge, it's not going to be increasing biodiversity much. But within my portfolio, I mentioned, and to her, I tried mentioning it. I was very taken aback by the comment, so it's hard to react quickly in those situations. But I just mentioned that, yeah, people are going to be part of all of this. I mean, we are also part of these ecosystems, and we need spaces that, you know, we need spaces that are accessible to people because, you know, big wild areas, while they're so important for people to, you know, to experience and to visit, it's not feasible for a lot of people. And having urban green areas, I mean, it's been shown to improve mental health. It's been really important in just keeping neighborhoods, you know, it can, I mean, there's also a lot of conversation about parks and gentrification, which is absolutely something that happens. But I think if people are at least privy to that, I mean, community gardens are a really good example of how urban green spaces can improve a neighborhood drastically while also keeping the people who are from that neighborhood in that neighborhood, because you can, you know, go to the community garden and participate, and that can be a community building experience. And it's a way for people to interact with nature on a day-to-day way that is not always common, but it's something that's really important because really everywhere we are is our environment. So we should be, yeah, we should be also focusing on places that people can actually visit on the day-to-day, because it can have a huge impact on people's relationship with nature and their relationship with their communities.
Follow up.
I just, as you were saying that, that reminds me of, I think Robert Michael Pyle coined the expression, the extinction of experience, in one of his essays about, and one of his examples was the value of empty lots, complete with quote unquote invasive species for children and so forth. But anyway, with that, why don't we see if somebody from the Zoom audience has a question, and then I think Dan has more, but anybody?
Yeah, just invite them to unmute themselves.
Yeah, just unmute yourself, and Claire, you can go back on audio.
Is it okay if I throw a question out? Sorry, I can't hear anybody.
Yes.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, Mom.
I'm wondering if you can, I'm sorry, I can't hear again.
Hi, Mom. I can hear you.
Okay, and I hope the group can as well. I'm wondering about this tension between art and science. And I asked this question knowing that your emphasis, of course, has been environmental writing as opposed to the science of conservation. And I'm wondering if you can speak to how effective one can be as an environmental writer without a strong science background. I'm also aware that science and statistics can be less than persuasive in changing the hearts and minds of people. I will mute myself.
Yeah, that's a good question. And as you well know, I am not a science person at all. Just years of struggling in the math and science realm, which is ironic because then it led me to getting an MS in environmental studies. And it's been fun too, because there are some science emphases that in this program that have been really helpful for me to pursue, because I think it is important when you're talking about the environment to also understand your environment at least a little bit. And yeah, I think with statistics and science, I think it can be persuasive if there is that balance between, instead of just, I think just showing people facts, that's not a really persuasive way of telling them anything. I think you have to pair that with interpretation of that. And people, I think that's what I've really appreciated about the environmental writing program, is that it's taught me how to communicate complex scientific issues in a way that is hopefully accessible to a wider audience. Because I think that's one of the more important parts of talking about environmental issues, is talking about it in a way that people can understand, because it's not going to really matter if people don't know what you're saying. Like if like carbon dioxide equivalent, I didn't really explain that well in my essay. But those are, understanding those terms is, I think, really important. So hopefully I'm getting at your question of like, there does need to be that balance, because I think statistics can be really useful and science can be so useful, but being able to communicate that is definitely a skill, and it's a skill I'm working on. It's one that I really have been wanting to, refine, and I think I have tried to do that in this program.
Cool. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, Claire, how you brought up this idea of like peer pressure. Like, what do we do about this peer pressure? And I guess my question is, for a person who wants to be involved, it's like really hard to wrap your head around it. There's so much that you feel like is not enough. You're not doing enough. So like, how do you mark that? How can you feel good about what you're doing, knowing that it's not enough? How do you gauge that?
Right. That's a really good question, Shani. And that's something, I feel like I've probably talked to you about this. I've talked to like many EVST peers about that, because it's so hard when it does feel like what you're doing actually doesn't matter. I've considered it in that I think having these practices of biking to school or recycling or doing those things, I mean, at the end of the day, that's not going to save the planet, but it is at least making sure that you're considering the environment every day in your own actions. I think that can be a really just useful practice for people to be doing, because if you're yeah, if you're actively thinking about your impact on the planet, I think that kind of helps create a way of thinking that, you know, is a little more empathetic, at least, and empathetic toward the planet and the people around you. So I think even if it's not doing, you know, if recycling that can isn't saving the world, at least it's creating more empathetic people. And I think that's kind of, so it's, again, emphasizing this like people part of environmental work.
And yeah, just as a really quick follow-up, because I think it's really can be hard internally to know, like, I want to be an activist, but I also need to take care of myself personally. So when are you being too much of an activist and you're burning yourself out? So like that self-care and activism is a really interesting conversation as well. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but just a comment.
Right, that's such a good question, and that's one that's talked about a lot in this activist realm. That I don't want to say like I'm in it, but I'm really interested in it, and I think it's important. So I've been reading a lot of books and hopefully trying to enter that world a bit. But yeah, that's something that's talked about so often because activist work is also, it's not very well paying and it requires a ton of time and it's easy to burn out. My other essay that I wrote for this portfolio talked about the things we pay attention to and the value of doing nothing. There's a fantastic book called How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy by Jenny Odell that talks all about the power of having, yes, and it's a beautiful cover. Oh, I love, yes, it's a gorgeous cover. Yeah, so it talks all about, you know, the ways we use our time and how, you know, having time to yourself, unscheduled free time can be an amazing way of recharging and yeah, and just being able to like think more clearly about the things that you're doing. And my essay kind of talked about why it's so important to advocate for, you know, like labor rights that allow people to not be working, yeah, like working 12-hour days. And I mean, it's, yeah, that concept of doing nothing is, it's definitely in a society that really values productivity. It's a counter opinion, and I think it's one that's maybe becoming more recognized. But yeah, I think it's just really important that people are advocating for, yeah, advocating for the space and time to be able to do nothing, because that's a huge part of avoiding burnout. And yeah, so I do talk about that a little more in my essay.
Awesome, thank you, Claire.
Yeah, Phil.
I was going to throw in a quick question here.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Hey.
Hi.
Am I on? Okay. Hi. Yeah. Being a wilderness person, I was interested in the work you did with the Sierra Club and the 30 by 30 campaign. I've never heard of the Great Burn, and I wanted to ask, is the Great Burn an area that underwent a fire, and is it recovering from fire? And I wondering if you might say something about maybe the importance of having an area that's in recovery as opposed to being perfectly pristine to begin with as part of the 30 by 30 program.
Right. Yeah, so the Great Burn, I think it did experience a burn. I'm like looking at Dan, my wilderness person over here. About 10 years ago, 110 years ago. Oh my God. So there was, yeah, this like great burn that happened, and it's been in recovery since. But the reason I mentioned that wilderness area is because it's not a wilderness area. It's this recommended wilderness that has been, you know, people have been really advocating to protect it for a long time now. So there's, I think, the Great Burn Alliance. There are a couple of other organizations that are doing that. But yeah, I think it's interesting because, right, it's a really interesting ecosystem because it went through this great burn, and it's also one that's not federally protected, or it's not protected in the ways that people really think it should be, which means it's been yeah, it's been something that is a part of the 30 by 30 dialogue. And it's one that I think the Sierra Club and Great Burn Alliance, it's kind of an example of this coalition of organizations needing to like work together in protecting a space. But yeah, it's a really, people love the area, and it's really interesting because I never knew about it until I came here, and I didn't really notice that, or I didn't know that a Great Burn, like a recommended wilderness area, was even something that existed. Yeah, I don't know if you're on here. Oh yeah, you are on here. Okay, I'll mute.
So
Wait.
The teacher in me just has to mention two books. The Great Burn is just about, begins about 40 miles due west of Missoula. It's up on the Idaho-Montana border, but there's a terrific book called The Big Burn. What's his name? Egan, the Seattle, great writer from Seattle. Timothy Egan has a wonderful book about the 1910 fire there. But then I just also want to throw out, and then I'll turn it right back over to some more questions. When you were at great discussion, Shawnee's question, which is that thread I see among environmental studies students year after year, and myself, everybody I know who's thoughtful, those tensions, that dynamic. But one of my favorite books is Rebecca Solnit's, now I'm gonna, Hope in the Dark. And the subtitle is Untold Histories, Wild Possibilities. It's about 15 years old, but it's a terrific book about that whole issue of how to keep going when you know you never can do enough, and yet reminding ourselves of all that has been done, and just to stay focused in the struggle. So.
Yeah, does anyone have any more questions?
Can I go now?
Oh, sorry.
So this is just a quick question back to the Camas side of things. One thing you didn't talk about in there, but in your portfolio, but I was interested, I mentioned in the introduction, and I knew that when you applied, that you had worked for 2 different kinds of journals at UNR. And I just wonder how that work helped you. I mean, I think that's one reason you were ideal for the editor job, but also what you brought from that and how different it was too. Maybe just a little bit about that.
Yeah, so before coming to I went to the University of Nevada, Reno, and I worked at 2 different journals, Brushfire Literature and Arts Journal, and the Montag, which was an undergraduate research journal. For the Montag, I was both, I think, an associate editor and then eventually the editor-in-chief, which was a fantastic way of just understanding all of the technical, I have to meet the printer at this time, like, all of the things that are kind of a pain about running a journal. That was really enlightening because in my other positions, so for Brushfire, I was the public relations manager. So I promoted the journal on social media, our website. I did artist spotlight interviews, and all of that experience really helped me with Camas in promoting it and, using our website. We have a blog that is, infrequently updated. That's something it's hard to keep that going. But for that, I was corresponding with different people to have them contribute to our blog. And that was all experience I was able to gain from Brushfire. But yes, with Montag, that really helped me understand all of the different elements to copy editing and corresponding with our printer and meeting deadlines, because I didn't have to do that as the PR manager, which is the really fun part about doing like social media and website things is that you don't have to deal with the paperwork of doing the printing of a journal. So yeah, that was kind of, yeah, those were some of those hard skills that I was able to, take from those experiences and bring them to Camas. And then also just sort of a desire to be part of that arts community. I think that was something that I realized I really liked in Reno and was really excited that offered. And it was a big reason why I applied to the environmental studies program in the first place. Yeah.
So Claire, you have another one of your teachers on this call here, and I'm going to put Anna Maria on the spot here. Anna Maria, what was Claire like as a student in your class?
Claire is so much fun. I was just thinking that if I
Wait a second, we're not hearing you for some reason. Hold on a second. Oh, maybe I need to go back to, yeah, turn yourself back on and I'll turn me off.
Can you hear me now? Can people hear me? Yeah. Claire is so much fun. She is a bright light in the classroom. And I'm glad that you gave me a chance to talk, Dan, because I hear all these other sides of Claire, like, the science and the activist and the editor, but I am a fan of Claire, the artist. Claire is just super creative on the page and in person. And I don't know, Claire, if you want to speak to how you intend to keep art a part of your practice and who you are and what you do for the environment, just with your own spirit, your own originality, your own creativity.
That's so nice. Thank you, Anna Maria. I think that was the most important thing I've discovered being in the environmental studies program is that I really like writing. And I think I've noticed a huge improvement in my writing since Phil's writing workshop in 2019 to yours in spring 2020 and now in Bryce's in spring of 2021. I think it's really speaks to how practice and actually writing is how you get better at writing instead of just thinking that you're good at it and then not ever doing it. And so that's something that I'm actually really for the future hoping to continue. I think of all of the things that I'm interested in, writing is the thing that is the priority, and it's the one that out of everything else, I know that's what I'll be pursuing. So I think, from here on out, I think I've developed some really good writing practices from these workshops. And I'm just, I think making sure I give myself the time to write too is going to be a huge part of that. And it's something that I'm considering in every job application that I'm looking at is how time consuming is this? Because the activist job that I've been looking at is about 65 hours a week with no time off. So I think that's sort of how I want to kind of continue cultivating that creativity is just making sure I have the time to do so because it's something I know is important and I know will be part of my life from here on out, but it's just making sure that's prioritized.
Well, I know from experience that can be hard, Claire, but I just also want to say, there are people out here who are waiting for your creative work, like not just me. I'm sure there are other people in this room and other people at the University of Montana and people who haven't read it yet. So please remember that too when you're prioritizing your creative work.
Thank you.
Coming close, and then you can ask if there's one more question.
Yeah. Is there one more question out there? If not, no pressure. Okay.
We're getting better at the mechanics of all this. Well, I think we're about an hour and a half, and Dan and I will now, we have some more questions and we'll go over some things with Claire and have a good conversation. But I think maybe this would be a time for everybody to either clap or do these little icons that the technology allows us to thank Claire so much for her work and for this really good presentation.
Team Claire.
It was wonderful.
So I think we'll sign off and
Good to go,
let
Claire.
you all, you can all stay and visit, I
Good
guess.
job.
You can turn the Zoom part on.
Yeah. So again, thank everybody for coming.
Thank you.
So we should just leave, right?